Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, today on this fantastic Thursday, and I'm sure you guys know exactly why this Thursday is fantastic for me, if you guys know anything about me, because in the first segment, we get to talk about my personal favorite player, LeBron James, and his recent, one of my favorite players actually, LeBron James, and his recent matchup against the Los Angeles Clippers. It happened late night at 10:30. If you guys were tuning into my shorts, you'll know exactly the results of this game. So we're just going to give a deep dive. We're just going to deeply dive into that. And in the second segment, we're going to finally talk about college basketball, since March Madness is going to be coming up really soon. So we're going to be looking at some of the teams that have the best shots at making the tournament, based on those interconference matchups that they have to go into against each other before they're able to make the official NCAA tournament. And as always, we're going to do a quick recap of all the games that went down from yesterday, because there was a lot of them and a lot of great performances, specifically the Chicago Bulls, which I want to point out in the third segment. We also, as always, we have our fourth segment that I will reveal after the third segment, so stay in tune for that. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody, as always, to please remember to tip and to donate. It's a little bit of a different link this time. It's a lot easier. The link that is gsmcspodcast.net, and you use this link so that way you can get your comments read and comments recognized. Really helps the show. Makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, you guys, the viewers. Once again, this new link is gsmcpodcast.net. It's in the description, so you guys don't have to worry about it, but it's also displayed below in the ticker on every single show segment. So once again, the new link is gsmcpodcast.net, where you can get your comments recognized in the super chat. So with that out of the way, we can go off and break into the first segment, which is the greatest basketball player of NBA history, LeBron James. Now, if you guys weren't paying attention to LeBron last night, he was going absolutely ballistic. He was on a mission. He was definitely not going to let this team lose. And it looked like this team was about to lose, watching the entirety of this game. And throughout the beginning of the game, it was relatively, it was close. The Lakers were up 23-22. But then, as the game kept going, the Clippers started to get rolling, and they started to really find their offense, and they started to make things a lot difficult for the Lakers on the defensive side of the ball as well, forcing a lot of turnovers and forcing a lot of bad shots, bad decisions coming in from a lot of the players. I noticed that in that first half, in the first three quarters, LeBron was a little bit conservative. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with being a conservative basketball player, but it's just when you're LeBron and your team is down by this much, you usually expect your best player to elevate his level of play, especially when the team is down. And you don't want to wait until late in the game when it's a little bit too late to make that comeback. You want to start it as soon as possible. But he is LeBron James, and it's rare that he ever meets it's rare that he doesn't meet the moment in the clutch. He was hitting clutch three after clutch three in any type of scenario that you could think of. Heat check went down. A shot over his signature. Look at the palm of his hand and then shoot. All of it was going down, and the Lakers were able to pull away with LeBron's performance in the fourth quarter. LeBron ended up outscoring the entire Clippers in the fourth quarter. He is almost 40, and he outscored an entire team in the fourth quarter. Now, the Clippers, this is their last home game against the Lakers when their home stadium is actually Crypto Arena, because they've been sharing the same stadium for years now. And for years, the Clippers have always been seen as the Lakers, just in the Lakers' shadow. Whenever the Clippers have a game, they cover all of the championship banners that the Los Angeles Lakers have and replace them with images of their players. And a lot of former Lakers find that incredibly disrespectful, because it's this is the Lakers, they consider it their house because they're the ones with all those championships. And the Clippers are just there. So with the Clippers just being there, now they're relocating over to a new arena, so that way they don't have to share the same arena with the Lakers. So this was the final matchup where the Clippers were the home team at Crypto Arena. And what a way to go out for the Clippers, am I right? I mean, I've said this countless of times about the Clippers and their history of like blowing leads in the playoffs. This is just another example of like, I understand it's the regular season, but this is just another example of like blowing a game in which you should have won. Because remember, they were up by 20 points at one point. Going into like the half and like going into the third quarter, they were up by a lot of points. And they just let that slip away late in the game because LeBron was answering quickly and LeBron was answering when they couldn't answer in the fourth quarter. And this is sort of a trend that we've seen from the Clippers in their collapses. In all of their collapses, they usually they tend to just not play the same basketball that they've always played. There's no other explanation for it other than them collapsing. In 2020, when the Clippers were in the bubble and they were going up against Denver, everybody assumed that once the series was 3-1, that the Clippers were going to end up winning it. And throughout majority of these games, it looked like that was going to be the case. They were up by 18 going into the half in Game 5. In Game 6, they were up by 16 going into the next half. And with 4 minutes left to go into the next half, they were up by 12 in Game 7. And in your mind, you're just thinking, like, what the heck happened? Like, what happened? This wasn't the same Clippers team that we saw that was so formidable in the regular season going into the playoffs. Like, this is just a complete and utter collapse. And it's every single time, it feels like, for these Clippers, except for that one time in 2021 when they actually made it to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history. And they did that when teams weren't really expecting much of them, when teams weren't really expecting them to win. And in all honesty, like, it sort of feels like that when they're the underdogs, they have a much better advantage. But when they're expected to win, they tend not to. And I just don't understand why. Because they have the players, they have the roster that they need, they have everything that they need. It just doesn't happen, and I don't understand why. But it's enough about the Clippers. Let's talk about LeBron James and just how amazing that LeBron James is. So LeBron is extremely close to being the first player ever to get 40,000 points in NBA history. And at this point, it's really like, what more does LeBron have to prove to people that he is the greatest basketball player of all time? What more does he have to prove? There's still several Jordan defenders that are reluctant to let up the fact that Jordan is their best player of all time. But 40,000 points. No one in the history of the league has ever gotten to that point. And if we want to be technical, if we're including the playoffs and the regular season, because this record is only like counting the regular season games, and in total, like all the All-Star games, he's already accumulated 40,000 points. And he's one of the only players that has 40,000 points ever accumulated in all of the games all of the professional games that he's played. And it's like, what more does he have to prove? Like, are we seriously going to bring the ring debate when we're talking about a guy who leads the NBA in total points scored ever and is the only one that's at 40K, while at the same time being top 5 in assists? Like, it seems that there's no real argument other than rings for Michael Jordan, and like the fact that maybe he had like a lot better peak years, constantly like leading the Chicago Bulls to back-to-back three-peats. But at the same time, it's like, are we really going to hold those championships to such a high value as opposed to all of the other accolades that LeBron has under his belt? Because it's not like LeBron has less rings because of his play. Like, the only time that anyone can legitimately say that the playoffs were LeBron's fault was in 2011. And that was, I feel like that performance, plagues LeBron. It's the number one argument that is used against LeBron when talking about his greatness and the status that he has in order to be the GOAT. Because with Jordan being 6-0 in the finals and him never losing is sort of seen as like a lot of value. Obviously, like if you never lose when you're in the finals, like obviously like you're a great player and you should be considered that. But it's a team sport. And a lot of people tend to forget that. Like, it wasn't just Michael Jordan that was on the team, and it wasn't just him. Similar to how, like, it wasn't just, I mean, most of the times it was just LeBron. If you understand, like, how difficult it was for LeBron to get help on both Cleveland and now the Lakers. But essentially, like, it's a team accolade, and I don't understand why they're held of such high value. And I don't understand why that finals series that happened a decade ago still like resonates with a lot of LeBron haters and a lot of people who don't think that LeBron is the greatest basketball player of all time. It doesn't make any sense to me because we're acting like Jordan was perfect in the playoffs. We're acting like all of these players were perfect in the playoffs. I guarantee you there is not one player in NBA history that hasn't underperformed in the postseason at least 1 point in their careers. There has never been, no one has been perfect in every single postseason that they've been in because it's part of being a human. Like, humans are imperfect, and like we might say that Michael Jordan is Black Jesus, but that's not true. Like, he's still human, and a lot of people don't really know about like the flaws of Jordan. They get shoved under the rug when talked about history just because of how great his legacy actually is. And I'm not trying to talk down on Jordan's legacy, but I'm not going to sit here and say that his entire career was perfect either. I mean, in '95, he lost to the Orlando Magic, a series in which he honestly, like, if he was the best player, like everyone said he was, he should have won. But he ended up not winning because he ended up blowing a game, actually. He ended up losing the ball late in the game in a moment in which Jordan thrives late in the game. He ended up losing the ball. Like, somebody ripped it from him. And is that not a mistake? Like, do people forget about that? That's a mistake. That's a choke. And people would say that, like, Jordan rarely chokes. That's a choke right there. Some people might use the argument like, oh, he was just coming back from baseball. I don't care he was coming back from baseball. He was averaging 31 points per game in that playoff series. Do not tell me that that wasn't a prime Michael Jordan in the postseason. And other players as well. Other players have had disappointing postseason runs. I can name off every single one of them. Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, Kobe Bryant, Yao Ming, Tracy McGrady. Other stars. The Detroit Pistons with Chauncey Billups, Shaq, and what other players have messed up? Larry Bird, like the Magic Johnson. All of these players, they've had disappointing playoff series, and they're not perfect. And I don't understand why the second that LeBron messes up just once, like just a little bit, it's automatically like it's all of a sudden this big deal. It's ridiculous, and it makes no sense because, again, oldest player in the league, and he's outscoring one of the best teams in the Western Conference. That is absolutely insane. Now, granted, this could all completely turn on its head later tonight as the Lakers, like, they go up against the Wizards. I'm sure it's tonight. I'm just gonna go check again. I know they play the Wizards going into. After coming off of the Clippers, I'm just going to make sure that they play today. And yes, they do play back to back against Washington. And honestly, like with the way that the Lakers have been, I would not be surprised if Jordan Poole all of a sudden just remembers how to shoot this game and just immediately like blows the Lakers out of the water. I would not be surprised at that whatsoever. So this entire thing could like be flipped all over its head the second they lose to Washington, because it's like he said, it's like LeBron said. There are times where they could beat the best players in there are times where they could beat the best teams in the league, and then there are times where you could lose to the worst teams in the league. And I honestly I don't see them losing to Washington just because of just how bad Washington is as an overall team. But again, the fear is still there because you guys know I'm a LeBron fan, and you guys know that I've seen it happen countless times. We've seen it happen countless times where it's every single year LeBron's teammates just fail to perform with the game and the balance. And it's getting a little bit better, I will say. D'Angelo Russell, he hit a clutch shot late in that game to make sure that the Lakers still had that commanding lead. And that was a big shot coming from D'Angelo, something that they're definitely going to need going into the postseason. But with every other player, it's a little bit iffy. I'm not entirely sure. They're unreliable. I'm sorry to say it, but it's LeBron's teammates, they don't tend to be that reliable in the postseason. It happens day in and day out. Players that are expected to be good, Antoine Jamison, Zilgauskas, and all of the other players that the Cavs brought to LeBron in that first stint with Cleveland, all of them have been proven to be either busts or just didn't perform when the lights shined the brightest. It's a common trend, and they have to figure it out now, and they have to gain that confidence now, so that way when the time comes in the playoffs, they are not scared and they do not fold under the pressure. But with that, we are out of time with this first segment, so tune in for the second segment where I talk about college basketball and March Madness, some of the teams that have the best chances of making the tournament, as well as my overall opinions on those teams and how I feel about them, and just my overall feel of college basketball, since I don't really cover college basketball on this podcast. So it's going to be the first time that I cover college basketball, so might as well spread my opinions on there. So stay in tune after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in the second segment, we are going to be talking about March Madness, since it is coming up really soon. A lot of teams are going to be participating in this tournament, probably one of the most popular tournaments that go on, and definitely the most the most relevant time for basketball is March, without a doubt, both in the NBA and in college, especially in college. But before I begin with this next segment, I'd like to remind everybody, as always, to please remember to tip and to donate, and to go ahead and to check the link to get your comments recognized. It is a new link this time. It is gsmcspodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, you guys, the viewers. The link is gsmcspodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and go into the second segment, where we are going to talk about March Madness. So before I begin, a little bit of my opinions on college basketball. I will say that during the regular season, college basketball is incredibly difficult to follow, as there are a lot of students and a lot of collegiate athletes that take the media by storm and that you have to pay attention to. So picking a lot of these teams to to make it into the tournament might be a little bit biased just because of like their record. But then again, it's like most of the time when I watch these college games, the teams that end up with the best record end up winning their their tournament, like that's in their conference, which allows them to be eligible for the NCAA tournament. And sometimes, like in this, I don't really make that many predictions when I'm watching March Madness, because it's one of the very few times in basketball where literally anything can happen. Like we could see, I'm from New Jersey. If you guys don't know entirely, I'm from New Jersey, and at the time of March Madness, when the Peacocks were going, the St. Peter's Peacocks, when they were going on their legendary NCAA run in the Elite Eight, nobody expected them to be there. Nobody whatsoever expected them to be there, and it was probably the most memorable March Madness that I've had, and like it was so much fun because it was a team that was representing my state that nobody thought was going to even make the tournament, somehow beat these big teams like Kentucky, beat Purdue, like all of these amazing teams, and it's like, wow, anything can really happen in this tournament. So predictions for who's going to win and my brackets, I don't really do them that much because it's like, again, any team can make it out. And honestly, like I stopped doing brackets once Purdue lost in the first round last year, and like it completely ruined everything in my bracket. So yeah, I'm still a little bit salty over that, but regardless, like anything can happen in this sport, and that's why a lot of people like the NCAA, like college basketball, and they like that March Madness because you have no idea who's going to step up in these games. It could be anyone, and you have no idea who's going to make a mistake because the pressure could get to some of these students a lot quicker than it would get to a lot of these athletes, and it's not entirely easy to tell who is going to be the better team on any given night. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead into some of the teams that are expected to come out. We'll go into the mid-majors first in the AEC. The Vermont Catamounts, they are 23-6, and they are 13-1 in the AEC. So I believe that they obviously have the best chance to make it out from their conference just because of that dominant record that they have over all of the teams that are in their conference. And they've reached the NCAA tournament 4 times in the past 7 years, including the number 15th seed in 2023. So I believe that they have the best chances of representing the AEC in the NCAA tournament. And like, there's not really much that needs to be said because this team is just like, it's far better than all the other teams that are in that same conference, in my personal opinion. And over in the Atlantic 10 division, the Dayton Flyers, I believe they have the best chances of making the tournament. They're 21-5, 12-3 in their conference. Obviously, it's a little bit more of a competitive conference, but they're projected for the number 5th seed in the most recent bracket matrix. So they definitely have a great chance of making it all the way and winning it because, again, anything can happen in March Madness. And it's like, again, like anything can happen. It's such a great tournament, and I really look forward to this tournament all the time. And the Atlantic Sun division, the Lipscomb Bisons, they have the best chance of representing that Atlantic division, and they aren't really the best team in their conference. Eastern Kentucky and Stetson, like they both have like a better record, and they sit above them in the Atlantic Sun division. So might not be the right team, but they are 17-1 when they score at least 80 points and have 6 players averaging at least 8 points per game. So I believe that that this is going to be enough to like allow them to eventually win the game in the end. However, it's not going to be easy to make it past both of these two teams, seeing as how they are ranked below them. They are below them in the brackets. Now, in the Big Sky Conference, there's the Eastern Washington Eagles. They're 18-10. but in the Big Sky division, they are 12-3. And so they won the regular season title at the Big Sky last season, but they lost to North Arizona in their conference tournament. So I believe now that they're hungry and they want to win, this is going to be the next step, and they're going to make it and represent the Big Sky in the NCAA tournament. Now, the Big South, the High Point Panthers, they're 23-6, 12-2, and they won 12 in a row earlier this season. So they're definitely capable of being like a great team and using that momentum that they've accumulated throughout the rest of the season, like using the momentum to their advantage. And they rank 29th in KenPom's adjusted offensive efficiency and lead the nation with 20.6 made free throws per game. So with all of this in mind, this team could have a shot to go very, very far in the NCAA tournament because, again, I mentioned earlier, like they went on 12 games. They went on a 12-game winning streak and to begin, so they know how to take advantage of the momentum that they have, and I believe it could carry over to their play in the NCAA tournament. Now, the free throws, they might drop just a little bit because of like the officiating in the NCAA tournament. I think the refs, like, they're going to be a little bit more lenient and allow the players to play and decide the game because that's usually like how it goes. But then again, like, we have no idea how the refs are going to be officiating this game. So it could, if they end up shooting a lot of free throws, that's definitely going to benefit their team, especially since they're really good at making free throws. Now, for the Big West, the UC Irvin Anteaters, they're 28. They're 20-8, excuse me, and they're 13-3 in the Big West, and they've split the season series with UC San Diego, and those two teams currently, like, they're tied in the Big West with a 13-3 record, but I believe that they're not really, the Tritons aren't eligible for the NCAA tournament in just their fourth year at a D1 level, so the Anteaters, like, they need to make this conference title. They need to make this conference title game, and they need to win it in order to clinch representing their team for the Big West. And the CAA division, the UNC Wilmington Seahawks, they are 20-8 and 11-5 in their division. It's the College of Charleston. They finished 31-4. And climbed as high as number 18 in the AP poll last year, en route to number 12 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's one of the teams that's in their conference. However, the Seahawks, they won both regular season matchups against that other team, and so I believe that with that in mind, they have a much better chance because they've won the two games against them. So, but still, we'll see how this. Again, anything can happen in this tournament. And the CUSA, or the Conference USA, the Sam Houston Bearcats, I believe they're going to be representing, they have the best chance of representing the CUSA in the tournament. They're 17-11, 10-3, and next Thursday's game between Sam Houston and Louisiana Tech, it's going to determine like who's going to be heading to that tournament. It's definitely like an early matchup to be aware of, so stay tuned for that game. Now, let's move on to like other teams that are in the mid-majors. The Horizon, the Youngstown State Penguins, I believe, are going to represent the Horizon division. 22-9, 14-6 in their division, and they set the school record with 24 wins last season and winning the regular season conference title. So obviously, they're still searching for their first NCAA tournament, but if they end up winning, like, I feel like this, like, after last season, after they set that record for 24 wins, I think, and after not making it, now is their time to end up representing the Horizon in the NCAA tournament. Because a lot of people, like, underestimate failure when it comes to sports teams. Like, a lot of these great players, they don't get where they are until they fail. So, and failing makes them better because they don't want to fail again, and they've been in that situation before where they have failed, and it's like, I already know how this goes and I'm not letting it happen. That type of deal. And I feel like that sort of mentality is going to play into them winning and them representing the Horizon in the NCAA tournament. Now, let's go into the Ivy League. So obviously, like with the Ivy League, it's relatively easy to pick. So the Princeton Tigers, they're 21-3, 9-2 in the Ivy League, and they have 3 teams in the top 100. They have Princeton, which is 51, Yale, which is 84, and Cornell, which is 93. And I think it's just going to be a fun tournament between these Ivy League schools. But again, like the Tigers, they have a history of always dominating these teams. So I feel like it's just going to be the same way. But the Tigers are currently riding a 6-game winning streak, including a 73-62 win over Yale on February. So with that in mind, I feel like they have the best chances of beating Yale. And the other team, Cornell, they have a big matchup against them on March 2nd. So we'll see how that changes. Like my overall opinions on this team. But I feel like the Princeton Tigers are definitely going to represent the Ivy League. Now, we have the MAAC. Now, this one's a little bit complicated because the MAAC is, if you guys don't know, that's the division that my school is in. Quinnipiac University, they have the best record in the MAAC right now, and they arguably, in my personal opinion, they have the best chances of making it to the NCAA tournament. However, Fairfield is still in the way. Now, Fairfield is the favorite to represent the MAAC, and I don't understand why, because they aren't even like the best team in the MAAC. Obviously, Quinnipiac is the best team in the MAAC, just judging off of like record. However, I believe that Quinnipiac University, like they tend to fall short when the light shines the brightest. Last year, they were the 3rd seed in the MAAC tournament, and they lost to Marist, a 6th seed, and they lost in a blowout. They completely collapsed, and part of it might have been like the fault of the coach, which Quinnipiac ended up firing and replacing with a new coach, who is leading this team to number 1 in the MAAC. So definitely, they still have a great chance, but they split the season series between Quinnipiac. Fairfield lost to Quinnipiac at home, but then ended up winning against Quinnipiac in their stadium. I was actually at that game. I was one of the people watching, and judging by how like Quinnipiac played, I mean, it didn't really look like Quinnipiac had a shot. So I understand like why Fairfield is like a favorite, but the game was still relatively close. So I don't want to say that Fairfield is going to represent it just because of like my personal bias with the school that I am affiliated with. And with Quinnipiac University, I think they have the best chance of representing the MAAC in the NCAA tournament, hopefully. But if not them, then it's most definitely Fairfield. And now we go on to the MAC, which is the Akron Zips. They're 20-8, 12-3 in the MAC. And obviously, like just off of that record alone, they definitely have the best chances. And they have a top 100 defense in KenPom's adjusted efficiency metric, and they only allow just 65.3 points per game. And defense is something that's much more reliable than offense, especially in these really big games. So I definitely think that's going to give them an edge. They also limit the opponents from shooting by only shooting 30% beyond the arc. So when teams go up against them, the teams shoot 30% beyond the arc. So obviously these are great defensive numbers for this team, and I just feel like they have the best chances. And their defense is definitely like it's on par to being one of the best. So I really feel like this like a team that has defense and that values defense is going to be the team that ends up winning a lot of games in this NCAA tournament. Now, we're running out of time for this segment, so we're out of time for this segment, so I'm going to go ahead and break into the third segment where I give a quick recap of some of the NBA games, and I'll touch on this March Madness most likely tomorrow and just continue the list of all the teams because, again, it's a lot of teams to cover. So just go ahead and go into a break and give a quick recap of all of the NBA games that happened last night. So I will be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As you can see, completely put on the Lakers jersey. LeBron James, he is the greatest basketball player the NBA has ever seen. I already talked a little bit about LeBron in that in the first segment, but still, that game against the Clippers, it was a very important game. So I'm going to give a quick recap of all the games that happened from last night in this third segment, as per usual. But I love talking about LeBron, and I love talking about the Lakers. So I might talk a little bit about them again in the previous matchup that they had, because it was LeBron. It was all LeBron that was doing anything for this Lakers team. It was nothing but LeBron, and that's a little bit of a problem that I have, because it took LeBron in the fourth quarter to for this team to actually have some sort of spark. And it's why? Where are the other teammates? But I digress. So with my LeBron fandom out of the way, let's go ahead and actually recap some of the other games that happened, because it wasn't just LeBron and the Lakers, even though it might as well have been LeBron and the Lakers. The Pelicans matched up against the Indiana Pacers before the Lakers were actually playing their game, and I did watch that entire game. And from the looks of things, the Pacers, they are the team that I see them as. And the Pelicans, they definitely need a little bit more work. I will say that. And the reason why I say this is because the Pacers and their defense, again, it's not that good. Their defense, the Pacers' defense, is really, really bad. And the only reason why they ended up winning this game was because of their offense being so much better, and the fact that the Pelicans just weren't playing defense, and the Pacers just took advantage of that. It was a very confusing game to watch. When from a Pelicans perspective, it was very confusing, the amount of just how many open looks that the Pacers were getting. And it's did you not make these adjustments out of a timeout? I'll just go off the box scores real quick. Halliburton ended the game with 17 and 13. While that might not look impressive, he did impact them late in the fourth quarter, because the Pelicans were edging, and they were really, really close to getting to the Pacers in that lead, and they were really close to blowing, to winning the game in the end. Excuse me, Jesus Christ. And the Pacers were looking like they were going to blow it, but every single time that it looked like the Pacers were going to blow the lead, they'd come right back on the offense, and they'd end up going on a run. And Pascal Siakam ended the game with 24 and 11, and Benedict Mathurin ended the game with 16 points. Miles Turner ended the game with 14 and 10, and there were Obi Toppin ended the game with 16 points. So a lot of scoring, as you'd expect from the Pacers and their high-caliber offense. And there was also a lot of scoring on the Pelicans side as well. I mean, Brandon Ingram, he ended the game with 30 points. Zion Williamson ended with 23. CJ McCollum ended with 23, but Jonas Valanciunas ended with 0. I mean, he only played 7 minutes, but regardless, the rest of the players that came off the bench for him, they just weren't there. They just weren't showing up. And with that in mind, and with the way that this team was playing against the Pacers, they were very, very lazy. And I don't understand why they were so lazy against this team. So the Pacers, they run one of the fastest offenses in the entire NBA. It's part of their name, pace. So they move the ball really, really quickly. And they get the ball down the court really, really quickly. So whenever teams, usually when teams go up and they make a shot, they're like, they just jog back, they're slow to getting back, and like they settle in their defensive set at the half court, right? And the offense comes walking down the court, just like slow, getting ready for their half court set. The Pacers don't do that. They do not do that whatsoever. Instead of like taking it slow and like walking the ball up the court, most of the time they will quickly inbound the ball, and while the team is like scrambling on defense, they will quickly find an open shooter in the corner, and he'll tend to be open because the Pelicans' defense and the defense in the NBA is lazy. They were taking forever to get back on defense, and because they were taking forever to get back on defense, the Pacers were able to take advantage of this, and they quickly moved the ball down the field so that way to abuse the fact that, like, oh, he's taking his time trying to get back from this layup. Like, Zion, there was this one attempt where Zion, he went up with a layup. He made the layup, but he went down, and he was like, when players go down, they take their time trying to get back up and all that. The Pacers didn't wait for him to get back up, though. They grabbed the ball, quickly inbounded it in like 1 second, and Tyrese Halliburton sprints down the field. And that him moving that fast and forces the Pelicans to play in a 4-on-5, essentially. And with that in mind, that draws in help defenders. And where do those help defenders leave players open? At the three-point line. So they tend to get a shot up at like maybe 4 seconds into the shot clock, and it's a great shot. It could be like an open three or like an open corner three. They get that shot religiously just because of how bad the defense really is on the Pacers. And again, they have that offense, but at the same time, while having that offense, their defense was also allowing the Pelicans to sort of stay in the game. And like again, their offense was like good enough for them to like to ensure that the lead wouldn't go away. I totally understand that. But at the end, what if the shots aren't falling for the Pacers? Just so happens, like because the shots that they take a lot of threes, and you got to make those threes. So what happens if like all of a sudden not a single three is being made? What happens? You don't have defense to fall back on, and it allows teams to sort of like stay in the game until you end up missing your threes. So that's definitely some bad news coming in for the Pacers going into the playoffs, in my personal opinion. And now the Pelicans, obviously, they cannot be this lazy on defense. Zion is incredibly lazy on defense, and it's something that cannot be allowed for a team like this. They have to be quick. They have to be adamant. They have to want to win these games. And from what I saw and how they were playing, they just weren't doing that. And they were really, really slow. Again, like they were just moving slow. It was like sluggish, and it didn't make sense. Like you see that these teams are taking advantage of how slow you are to getting back on defense. Put a hand up. Like, are you really not going to run and sprint back on defense? They were just jogging. It didn't make any sense to me. But that was it for that game. And we have another game. The Chicago Bulls went up against the Cleveland Cavaliers. They won 132-123 in double overtime. So a little bit of bad news for the Cavs because, like, again, losing to the Chicago Bulls. They aren't really, if you're the Cavs, you're not really supposed to lose to a team like that, especially, like, getting taken into 2 overtimes by that team. Not something that, not ideal for the Cavs. So they're going to drop down in power rankings after losing to this. I have no surprises there. And again, it's just a mediocre team that the Chicago Bulls have. And the fact that they were able to beat the Cavs just gives more reason as to why I think that the Knicks are a better team than the Cavs. And the Chicago Bulls actually did something historic in this game. I'm going to list off the stats. Kobe White ended the game with 14 and 12. DeMar DeRozan ended the game with 35 and 10. Nikola Vucevic ended the game with 24 and 13. And Andre Drummond ended the game with 17 and 26 rebounds. This is the first time in a while that 4 Chicago Bulls players ended the game with a double-double. And that is absolutely insane because those numbers that they put up, especially Drummond's numbers with those rebounds, is astonishing. Like, that's great team basketball. right there from the team. And I could sort of, like, they have these flashes of, like, being a great team. It's just they can't seem to maintain that in the regular season. Granted, like, obviously, like, a little bit has to do with, like, some of the injuries that they've maintained in the regular season, not having Zach LaVine and all, like, that makes sense. But again, like, they have the players. DeMar DeRozan, he used to be the face for the Toronto Raptors, and he used to lead the Raptors to the playoffs every single time. Now, all of a sudden, he can't do that on the Bulls? Like, really? But I digress on the Bulls. And the Cleveland Cavaliers, like, that's a serious problem, losing to the Bulls in double overtime. Donovan Mitchell ended the game with 19 points. Wasn't his best night, and they definitely could have used his production for this game. And going on to some of the other games, Minnesota, they beat the Memphis Grizzlies. No real surprises there because Minnesota is the number 1 seed, and the Memphis Grizzlies, they are a bottom feeder in the Western Conference. They aren't bad. They aren't Pistons level bad, but they're still pretty bad. They are 13th in the Western Conference, just ahead of the Trailblazers and the San Antonio Spurs. And the gap between, like, unlike the Eastern Conference where they have 2 teams that literally haven't won 10 games yet, these guys, like, no team on the Western Conference is much more competitive. So a lot of their, while they are 13th, their record is still relatively close to the Houston and the Utah Jazz. But obviously, again, like, no one really expected the Grizzlies to come out winning this game. Anthony Edwards ended the game with 34 points, so obviously very impressive. Cat ended the game with 13 and 11, and Rudy Gobert was mid this game, 8 points, 8 rebounds. He shot pretty efficiently, I will say that, but again, it's not really that much. But he's a defensive anchor, so it makes total sense. And there's not really much that needs to be talked about with this game. I mean, the results of the game were completely expected. And the Mavericks went up against the Toronto Raptors in a very intense matchup, 136 to 125. You wouldn't tell it was intense just by the score, but Luka Doncic came out a little bit slow going into the first quarter and the second quarter, but he ended up picking it up as he always does. Ended the game with another triple-double. Is there any surprises there? 30 points, 16 assists, 11 rebounds. Kyrie Irving also helped out, 29 points. Kyrie has definitely proven to be a great asset to this Mavericks team when he does play. My opinions on Kyrie are relatively strong. I'm not a big fan of Kyrie, but I will say that when he's playing, he knows how to play. He knows how to play basketball, and he's one of the best ball handlers, one of the best shot creators, one of the best point guards in the NBA. I still consider him as one of the best point guards, whatever you want. Shooting guard, if you want to call him a shooting guard, then you can call him a shooting guard, but one of the best point guards that the league has seen. His raw handles, his ability to create shots, all of that is just, he's without a doubt a Hall of Famer in my personal opinion. And a lot of people might disagree with that, but you can't really tell the story about basketball without mentioning Kyrie Irving and his handles. So, and the fact that he's regarded as the best ball handler that the league has ever seen, he's definitely in the Hall of Fame just for that. And a lot of people don't really count the Olympics and his Olympic career for his case in the Hall of Fame. But I'll get to that in a little bit. So, next game, another game that went down was the Denver Nuggets going up against the Kings, and the Denver Nuggets ended up winning 117-96. Jamal Murray ended the game with 32 points. Jokic ended the game with another triple-double. Is there any surprise? 14, 11, and 14. And at this rate, I honestly think that he's going to pass Westbrook. I honestly think he's going to pass Westbrook in triple-doubles very, very soon. And it's there's nothing that Westbrook can do to really stop it, given how he comes off the bench now. So we might be seeing a new triple-double king very soon in the future. But the Kings in this matchup, they did not play well. They didn't have De'Aaron Fox this game, so it makes sense. But the rest of the team just wasn't performing where I think it needed to be. Keegan Murray ended the game with 21 points. Sabonis ended with 13, 7, and 10. And the rest of these players, they shot relatively inefficient while scoring in double digits. Malik Monk, 14. on 5 of 14. Actually, no, 6 of 16, pardon me. Sabonis was the one who went 5 of 14. And who else played well? Chris Duarte, 18 points with 7 of 14 shooting. So the Kings right now, they're in the 8th seed in the Western Conference. I wouldn't really call that a spot that you'd want to be in because they're just behind the Lakers. And the Lakers, they're making their strides. So if the Lakers end up taking the 8th seed, while Sacramento holds the 9th seed, Sacramento might end up seeing Golden State again, this time in the play-in. And judging by how they played against them last year, I'm not entirely sure that's the team that they want to go up against. Or maybe they want to go up against them so that way they could have some revenge. But not an ideal situation for the Sacramento Kings just because of going up against Golden State and that fear of going up against Golden State. And that's all the games that ended up happening yesterday. And with that, we are out of time for this third segment. So tune in for the fourth segment where I talk a little bit about Team USA, given how the names for the some of the players on the roster have been announced and confirmed. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of Team USA and the history of the Olympic basketball and like what's really to be expected. So tune in after this short break. And we are back with the second segment, fourth segment, of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And today, in this fourth segment, we're going to be talking all about Team USA, because recently, the star players, there are star players that have been considered locks for Team USA, assuming that there aren't any injuries that continue on through this season. So the players that are definitely going to be on Team USA are Drew Holiday, I know, a little bit weird, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, Joel Embiid, and Jason Tatum. So this right here, Kevin Durant, LeBron, Steph, Joel, and Tatum, that is 100%. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, Devin Booker is probably going to participate in Team USA basketball as well. So obviously, great starting lineup. I mean, Steph Curry, Jason Tatum, Kevin Durant, LeBron, Joel Embiid. What more can you really ask for? They have the height, they have the defense, they have exactly what you need to go up against a lot of these international players. Drew Holiday coming off the bench, again, great defender. Devin Booker, great shot maker as well. Great options coming off the bench. And the stipulation around Team USA it's a little bit of a tricky one because, like, we, as the United States, I say we tend to be the best team 9 times out of 10 in basketball. Like, all the time, like, Team USA always wins the gold in basketball because it's the sport that, like, that North America made. So obviously, like, all of the players are going to be, like, the best. However, I will say that the notion of why they're the best, it was a little bit skewed. Like, back in like the early 80s and whatnot, with in the Olympics, it was sort of seen like the athletes are better just because they're American. And it wasn't like, oh, they have the experience. It was just because that they were Americans that they were better, especially like around that time, because that was around the time of like the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and all that history plays into a part, and like how American patriotism was seen as like this very big thing. So it played into a part in the Olympics, obviously, and it played into the part like with the fact that like America constantly wins these basketball tournaments, and whenever America loses, it's a big shock, and they don't really lose that often because like again, it's very shocking because of how advanced like basketball is in North America. Like they play it every single time, so their athletes like are obviously they're just going to be a lot better. Michael Jordan and like Magic Johnson, all of those players, they grew up playing that game. And I'm not saying that like international players didn't grow up doing that. They were starting to grow up doing that once the NBA started becoming a lot more famous worldwide, and a lot more international players started making it into the NBA, because it was like a sort of a revolution, because it was like, oh, these foreign players, like they're actually really good too. So maybe we should draft them. Because when you think about it, like it's not because like the athletes were American that they were better. It was just because they had much more tools and they had much more experience than the rest of the other countries had, because basketball was taken a lot more seriously in North America than it was in other parts of the world. So when you take that in mind, and when you keep that in mind when talking about a lot of these players like Pau Gasol and Manu Ginobili, Dirk Nowitzki, Yao Ming, all of these players, they were great international players, but they only started, like, the international players only started coming once the globalization of the NBA started coming, because a lot of these players were, like, inspired by 1992's Dream Team, and they wanted to be as good as that competition. So while we were sort of taking it as, like, a cakewalk, we Team USA, those guys were working day in and day out trying to get the gold and try to steal the gold from Team USA. And this thing is like, it's been happening throughout like the entire years, where like the United States doesn't end up winning, and like it's expected for them to win. And the Redeem Team in 2008, great example of when like Team USA was struggling in basketball. They had to bring along all sorts of like recruits and all sorts of players and new coaches to make a team that was dedicated to the Olympics. And like they spent years, along like with how long they spent, like the other teams spent and the other nations spent, trying to hone their game for these types of tournaments. So I talked a little bit about history. So let's talk about like what's going on now with and why these players are on this team. So earlier in the FIBA basketball tournament, which we're expected to win like every single time, Team USA, a lot of the star players that are on this roster right now, they opted out. They didn't want to be part of the team. And Team USA, at least what the internet called it, they had to send their B team or like their C team. So essentially it was like players that have never been part of Team USA, and they weren't the first option, I guess you could say. Like these players that they got for the FIBA tournament, they weren't the first option of players that were considered to be on Team USA, because all of the players opted out. It left the room for a lot more players to opt in, and obviously this was seen as a mistake, because we didn't even send in our best players. We sent in the reserves, if you will. And obviously when you put our reserves against like number one strings, regardless of what nation they're from, it's not going to look good. So this team is sort of like, it's been assembled just to like sort of redeem our very embarrassing loss in the FIBA tournament. So you might consider it like LeBron's version of the Redeem Team, because like while he was part of the Redeem Team, he wasn't. It was sort of like, I don't really consider him as the face of that team. I thought it was Kobe that was I know I'm wearing a LeBron jersey right now, but Kobe was without a doubt the reason why that Team USA team was the best team in the entire world. And There's not really much that needs to be said because Kobe has never lost a game while playing for Team USA. Never. He never lost a game playing for Team USA. He understood what it took to win at such a big scale, and he already understood the passion that a lot of these international players have. And a lot of the NBA players, they don't really share that. They don't really some of them, they don't really share that same passion, and they don't really see that passion. And they take it with like a grain of salt sometimes because they're thinking in their mind, oh, we're NBA players, we're star players, we make so much money playing the games, we're the best of the best, we're definitely going to win. And that's not team basketball. You're not going to win by thinking like that. And that's been the problem with Team USA a lot. When they don't win, it's because they aren't taking it seriously. And while it's good for the game because it shows just like how a lot of these other countries are like getting better at basketball and catching up, it's like, all right, that's cool, but like now we want to win again. Like give us back that gold. And it was it's a staple. It's something that happens like every single time in the Olympics, assuming that the United States end up losing a game. And when they end up losing a game, it's like the worst news ever for all of these NBA players. But yeah, Kobe was the best player on Team USA. He understood what it needed, what it took to win, and that's what elevated the team to reaching those types of heights. And now with Team USA and this Team USA like loading up with super teams, I feel like they're going to be doing the same thing. However, one thing that is overlooked going into like FIBA and the Olympics, the rules are slightly different. And the officiating is also slightly different. So that also plays a factor in NBA players when they're playing in these types of tournaments because the officiating is not what they're used to. Like, the biggest example that I could get is the fact that the refs, they barely call like those flopping calls that you'll see in the NBA. So not sure how Joel Embiid is going to favor with these refs. And there are also some calls like that don't get called. Like they would, for example, I watched the Dream Team documentary, and one of the players was saying that, like, let's say there's a player running at you, right? And he's trying to run around the screen. You, as a defender, can get in front of him and like bump into him, and it won't be a foul on you. Like the ref won't call it a foul. Like they'll just see it as like you're playing physical defense, which I'm not sure if I really prefer, but I would honestly I'd like teams that like have that tough defense, and I like the refs that allow players to like get up and put a hand in the player's face, because it's like with the way that defense is played in the NBA, it's very difficult to play defense and be physical at the same time, because if you touch anybody, it's considered a foul. The rules are a little different when going into FIBA. So Team USA sort of has to overcome that before like they could be like that team that everybody knows that they can be. But with that, that's the end of the last segment and thus the end of the show. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And remember to go to this link if you want to get your comments recognized. Again, it is a new link, not the same that I've been doing on other shows. It's gsmcpodcast.net. Helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, you guys, the viewers. Once again, the link is gsmcpodcast.net. It's a lot shorter and it's a lot less annoying to say 24/7, so I'm grateful for that change. But again, that's the end of the show. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't